Kimani Ichung'wah, a tough defender of Ruto, found himself in trouble trying to defend the Ruto government. The majority leader of the Kenyan National Assembly and Member of Parliament has labeled allegations that the police kidnapped and forcibly disappeared protesters in recent large-scale demonstrations a conspiracy.
But it is
work
in progress. Was there a timeline for its ratification, according to Mzalendo?
Many things had timelines on.
Was there a timeline?
He said he would do.
No timeline.
He said he would do a public inquiry into cronyism within 30 days. Has he done it?
Public inquiry?
Yeah, a public inquiry to establish the extent of cronyism and state capture and make recommendations. Page 61 of your manifesto. Has he done it? It's been more than 30 days. It's been 2.5 years.
I'll tell you, Mehdi, if you read the NADCO report, there are recommendations on what is to be done on state cronyism, on state capture, on extrajudicial killings. That is captured in the NADCO report.
But you haven't done what the manifesto called for on multiple things. And look, you know, and you admitted, to be fair, that people are unhappy. There's a perception of the government that's unpopular. Kenyans have been most upset about the cost of living. And yet, when thousands of young Kenyans took to the streets in protest of your government last year, the finance bill, your government opened fire on them, killed them, forcibly abducted and disappeared them. How do you justify such a violent crackdown on your own citizens in a democracy?
First, let me say this, Mehdi. As you said, because you never allowed me to answer the question on the promises kept. I told you the manifesto is being implemented chapter after chapter, right from housing to the cost of living that you're speaking about. Because, of course, you cannot judge what was to be done in 5 years, in a short 2 years.
Well, some of them you said you would do in 30 days, and you haven't. But just deal with the violence. How do you justify what happened last summer in Kenya?
Now I'm coming to that. You said the cost of living. I can tell you what we've done with the cost of living, from the subsidizing of production rather than subsidizing consumption, as we promised in our campaigns. You remember the first demonstrations after the elections in 2023 were about the cost of living.
Which also were greeted with violence from the state.
And unfortunately, all demonstrations end up with deaths, which is a very unfortunate incident. And it is not true that people demonstrate and you open fire. It is just the nature of what happens with our demonstrations, that they turn violent and the police have to intervene. And let me say that at this point, it's not just unfortunate. We all regret the loss of life during the 2022 demonstrations and even the demonstrations of June last year. Unfortunate that lives had to be lost, but it was not that fire was opened on young.
Yeah, the way you talk, lives had to be lost. No, lives were taken, right? People were shot in the head.
No life ought to have been lost, and nobody can justify the loss of life anywhere in the world out of demonstrations of.
According to a Reuters investigation, 19-year-old Charles Owino went to a protest, was killed with a gunshot to the head. The police recorded his death as a road accident. 21-year-old Shaquille Obienge, he died the same day as Owino, also shot in the neck. Police recorded his death as a road accident. If these deaths are so regrettable, why is the Kenyan police covering them up?
Fortunately, Mehdi, we have a very robust constitution in the country, the best constitution in sub-Saharan Africa. This constitution has very good and clear safeguards that make sure that everybody is held to account for your actions, including the police. You've mentioned 2 or 3 people. I think from IPOA's records, the Independent Police Oversight Authority, from their records, they have recorded about 60 deaths from last year's demonstrations. And there are some, I think about 30-something, that are still under investigation. They have dismissed some after close the files after investigation. Therefore, I can assure you, the police may, even somebody within the police force may desire to cover up.
Can you tell our audience tonight, how many Kenyan police officers
in the country will not allow you to cover up?
You say that, this is great rhetoric. How many police officers in Kenya have been prosecuted for their role in the violence in 2023 or 2024? Can you tell us how many?
I'll tell you from the last year's demonstrations, 3 are already in court.
3 police officers have been prosecuted?
3 are being prosecuted.
Are being prosecuted, but none have been prosecuted.
Another 34 cases. Before you prosecute somebody, you have got to investigate. So you have to prosecute.
This is what Human Rights Watch said last year. Bodies of people showing signs of torture continue to turn up in rivers, forests, quarries, mortuaries. The authorities have yet to investigate or prosecute anyone for these crimes. Kenya has a history of police brutality and lack of accountability for serious abuse.
So you want
That's Human Rights Watch.
You want to believe what Human Rights Watch said, not what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I do not believe there are enforced disappearances perpetuated by the state in Kenya, Ichung'wah told head-to-head host Mehdi Hassan in front of a live audience at London's Conway Hall. Ichung'wah, a close ally of President Ruto, was asked to address violent crackdowns against demonstrators by Kenyan police and security services, particularly in June 2024, when thousands of young Kenyans took to the streets in protest of the government's finance bill. According to the Kenya Human Rights Commission, since Ruto took office in 2022, there have been at least 63 civilian deaths, 65 forced disappearances, and over 1,400 unlawful detentions of protesters. Iro Human Capital Development might soon be out of a job. Justin Muturi knows he's probably on his way out, Ichung'wah said. He definitely knows it. During the interview, Ichung'wah was also asked to clarify his personal net worth after Junet Mohammed, the minority leader in Kenyan parliament, joked that he was worth 5 billion shillings or $38 million US dollars.
Because I'm going to believe a human rights group over a politician who started by saying, I won't give you straight answers.
It is their take, Mehdi. It is their take, and I didn't come here to give their take. I came here to give my take and the perspective.
So they're wrong, you think? The police officers are being held to account?
They are wrong because the police officers must be held to account.
But they haven't been.
And that is why we have institutions that will hold them to account.
So what you said today about the deaths sounded good. You said it's regrettable, there should be no loss of life. That's what you say here. What you say in Kenya is a little bit different. This is what you said in December about the abductions of young people. You said that they're a way for people to basically con the system. You said these people, quote, they're not really abducted, you said, quote, they're locking themselves in Airbnbs with their girlfriends and hiding. Are you saying that all these abductions, Kenyan parents crying over missing children, bodies turning up in rivers, that's people pretending, hiding with their girlfriends in an Airbnb? Do you understand how offensive that sounds?
Mehdi, I was speaking in Bungoma County, and the context was the clamor for, there was the misconception that every other abduction in the country was being perpetuated by security agencies. But what I said is that we have laws in the country that people who are construed to have broken the law in terms of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, if they are found culpable, the DCI or the police should and must arrest them and take them before courts of law, because that is what they deserve. And the police and security agencies have no business abducting anybody, and nobody should be abducted.
But they are abducting people.
By security agencies.
But they are abducting.
Allow me to make my point, because you asked me a question. And it is in that context then that I said, and again, it is not all cases, Mehdi, that were out of abductions or what was construed to be abductions. And let me tell you, there were cases where people, somebody was holed up in an Airbnb, but reported himself as abducted.
But for you as a leading politician in the country, where people are being disappeared in a democracy in 2024, 2025, it seems a strange thing to focus on, not the kids whose bodies are being found in rivers and forests and warehouses with gunshot wounds to the head and the neck. And instead of focusing on that, you focus on one case of somebody in an Airbnb. Seems strange.
Mehdi, I also say there were cases of political conspiracies where people...
Can we talk about the cases that are open and shut, police, intelligence services abducting kids? You accept that happens in your country? Your government and your intelligence services have abducted innocent people. You accept that?
It has been claimed. Those are matters.
Not claimed, it's happened.
It has been claimed.
You don't accept it's happened?
I do not believe there are enforced disappearances perpetuated by the state in Kenya. Not in this day and age. We have an administration which, for the first time, none other than the president himself committed that never again will Kenyans have to disappear and you fish their bodies out of River Yala or River Tana like happened some time back. And therefore, why I say they are claims, but it's because they are claims that are being investigated.
They're not claims. Let me give you a fact. Can I give you a fact?
Unless you give me a fact.
I'm going to give you a fact right now, because the audience around the world watching may not know this. The Attorney General of Kenya, his son was abducted. Literally a serving member of the government. His son was taken. How did he get him released? Can you tell our audience?
The Attorney General of Kenya is called Dorcas Oduor.
Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General,
he's been abducted. The person who has alleged that his son was abducted is the former Attorney General, Justin Muturi. And I'll
How
tell
did
you,
he get his son released?
And I'll tell you again, I have read from the media, heard Justin Muturi what he said, just as you heard it. It is an allegation by Justin Muturi, somebody who has...
Mr. Muturi says he went to the president and said, President Ruto, the intelligence service has taken my son. President Ruto called the head of your intelligence service and his son was released.
Have you heard Mehdi from President Ruto on the same? Have you heard from the director of intelligence?
You tell me what's President Ruto's... Has he denied it?
Have you heard from him?
No, I don't live in Kenya. You're the expert. Has President Ruto denied that?
Why don't you allow then me to tell you my take?
Do.
Because that's your take.
Please.
From what has been reported.
That's not my take. I'm reporting a member of your government. This is
You're
amazing. I'm quoting a member of your government, not the opposition, a member of your government who you're calling a liar because he says his son was abducted.
That's why I told you Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General and current Minister for Public Service,
yes,
is a politician to begin with, has beef with his boss.
Okay.
In the government he serves.
Wow. So he made up a story about his son being abducted.
There are reasons. Wow,
Kenyan politics.
Will you allow me
Please.
to make my points?
Please, this is just, I'm stunned.
There are reasons why Justin Muturi was removed as Attorney General around the time of the demonstrations in June of last year. There are reasons probably why Justin Muturi knows he's probably on his way out. It is him who has made those allegations. That is a matter under active investigations. As I told you,
has President Ruto denied it?
We have got, you will need probably to invite him and ask him.
You can't
I am not President William Ruto, neither am I his spokesperson.
Has he denied it? It's a simple factual question, yes or no?
I have not heard him, and I don't know if he has been asked to...
So one of the... I just want to recap for our viewers, just to be followed. A minister in the Kenyan government has said that his son was abducted by the intelligence services and the president of Kenya had to intervene to release his son. You suggest the minister is lying and on his way out, but the president hasn't denied any of this happened.
I don't suggest. I tell you emphatically, the minister has reasons to lie.
Okay.
Emphatically.
Not 5 billion, he said. Probably about close to 1 billion. On the widespread criticism of Kenyan MPs flaunting their wealth online, Ichung'wah said, "It's rather unfortunate. Nobody should do that." Members of Parliament in my party in the House who I see flaunting things that are not palatable with Kenyans, I tell them, "Hey bro, this is not good," he added. Hassan and Ichung'wah are joined by a panel of 3 experts. Awino Okek, Professor of Feminist and Security Studies at University of London, Essos. Irungu Houghton, Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, and Moses Langat, Kenya community leader in the diaspora based in the UK.
He has reasons
and he's on his way out?
He definitely knows it.
All right, Justin Muturi, if you're watching, you may want to put your resume out there.
Let me tell you, Mehdi. Let me tell you, because it's all politics.
Even the abduction of his son is politics?
It is all politics. It's playing politics with a very unfortunate incident.
Let's bring in our panel now to see what they think about all of this. I'm going to go first to Irungu Houghton, who is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. Irungu, your organization has been documenting a lot of these abductions. You yourself, I believe, have spoken to some of the abductees and their families. Kimani suggests that this is kind of water under the bridge. There's no real evidence for now. A lot of it is politics. What's your view?
I think there has been a trend of targeting dissent, people who have protested in our streets, excessive use of force against people essentially just expressing the right to assembly. And in one case, for example, this young man was essentially held incommunicado. He was stripped naked. He was shaved, not just on top of his head, but in his pubic areas. He was interrogated ad nauseum about who his connections were, and all he had done was to post cartoons and artificially generated images onto the on his Twitter handle.
Images of what, can I ask?
Of the president in a casket.
Is that appropriate? Somebody makes fun of the president in Kenya and they get tortured like this?
When William Ruto became president, when the buck stopped at his desk, he took decisive action to end the extrajudicial killings that were happening. True, what Irungu says is true. There was a case of about, I don't know if there were 3 or 4 young Kenyans who were allegedly abducted, and it went out that
not allegedly. They were abducted.
They were abducted, as it was reported. They turned back to their families. There was one case where one of them turned back, appeared in a disco at night with a fully charged phone. So you need to ask yourself where
I don't understand what the battery power of phones has to do with torture and human rights in Kenya.
If I am abducted and kept incommunicado without a phone or anything, I do not expect you to have a fully charged phone and to reappear after 2 weeks.
Do you deny they were tortured? I mean, Irungu just described horrific torture.
I am not denying anything if you listen to me, and please listen to me keenly, because as I said, Mehdi, there are cases of abductions. As to who is abducting people is a question.
They say the police. Am I wrong, Irungu? They saying security services.
They say so. The police say it is not us. So what do we do in a country with institutions that work? Allow the investigative agencies and institutions to investigate and get to check who has abducted who.
So on that note, I just want to bring in some more panelists. It's a good point to raise there. Owino Okech is a professor of feminist and security studies at the University of London, SOAS. Kimani says, what do you do in a country where the institutions work? And I want to ask you, do the institutions work in Kenya? Is there accountability? What is your perspective?
I think we must begin by recognizing, Mr. Ichung'wah, that there's a huge trust deficit with the Ruto regime. You earlier on spoke about the fact that you're 2 years into a 5-year term. We're all employees. Some of us are employees. Your employer does not wait for you to reach your end of contract to tell you have you performed well or not. We all have performance reviews and performance contracts. And I think the citizens who voted for you are saying things are not working. I do not believe that institutions are working effectively, because if I tell you that people are being abducted outside your house and you say it's not my people, then your answer should be to tell us who those are. You're not giving Kenyans any confidence if you say it's not the police, it's not the NIS, but somehow we don't know who they are. And we're supposed to automatically assume that that's fine since it's not the police and National Intelligence Service. Trust must be rebuilt, Mr. Ichung'wah, if we are to trust the Ruto government.
Do you want to respond to Owino?
Yes, and I agree with her that trust must be earned, not actually rebuilt. You earn your trust from your actions, and that is why it is only right that we allow the institutions to investigate so that those who claim they have been abducted, because as I said, there are criminal elements that have been involved. And I remember last year, at the heat of the youth demonstrations in June last year, I think around July or August, if I'm not wrong, bodies were discovered in a place called Kware in Embakasi, just outside the airport in Nairobi. And it turned out that somebody, some sort of crazy serial killer, was killing ladies and dumping their bodies there. Therefore, you can imagine what would have happened if we were all quick to judge and say, yes, these are protesters, young protesters, in the backdrop of what was happening then, who have disappeared and now their bodies are dumped there.
Before I go to our third panelist who's been waiting patiently, Irungu, very quickly, just comparing, Kimani seems to be suggesting that pre-2022, there was lots of bad stuff, and since then things have improved. As someone who's covered multiple governments over multiple years, do you agree with that?
No. I mean, I think what has happened in the last 6 months has been really remarkable and very scary for many Kenyans. 89 abductions, 63 deaths, 29 still missing. These are not normal times. I mean, if you put together the number of people who were killed in 2023 and 2024, that is 4 times the number that were killed during the multi-partyism period and the struggle for multi-partyism. So we've seen a real jump in these figures. But it's not just the figures. It's just what happens to a family, to a community whose young one has had their life ripped from them. So I think we have to get beyond the numbers to just think about what does it mean for the people that you mentioned that are finding their way in body bags in mortuaries in Kenya. It has to stop.
Ichung'wah stands firm before the cameras, his expression a mix of resolve and concern as he addresses the ongoing violent crackdowns against demonstrators by Kenyan police. He recounts the tragic toll of these events, revealing the alarming statistics released by the Kenya Human Rights Commission. With a somber tone, Ichung'wah emphasizes the urgent need for accountability and reform within the security services. He addresses the rising tension in the country, acknowledging the frustrations of Kenyans who feel unheard by their government. Ichung'wah reflects on the political climate, hinting at potential changes ahead as some leaders face scrutiny over their roles in the unrest. He expresses concern about his colleague Justin Muturi's uncertain future in politics, suggesting that change is inevitable. As the conversation shifts to personal matters, Ichung'wah clarifies his net worth, dispelling rumors that have circulated in the media. He downplays the exaggerated figures, asserting that his actual worth is closer to 1 billion shillings. Responding to criticism of MPs flaunting their wealth, Ichung'wah voices his disapproval and calls for modesty among his peers.
One of the authors of the party manifesto in 2022. So I do want to ask you the same question I asked Kimani at the start. What do you make of this study that was done by a non-partisan group, which shows 14 promises out of 281 in the manifesto have been fulfilled? Do you think that's what's driving a lot of Kenyan frustration?
Mehdi, first and foremost, we need to understand that the president has decided to be a leader, not to be a politician. I want to say that regarding the youth protests, they started a conversation with the president. He listened to them. The youth said they wanted part of the finance bill to be altered. The president listened to them. They had conversation. In fact, members of the parliament went back. They redrafted the finance bill. There were no shootings while they were asking for the changes. Trouble only started when we started having people going in to interfere. We had politicians going in. The youngsters, whom we appreciate, form over 75% of Kenya's population. About 12% of them are unemployed.
Protests were politically motivated, not driven by organic anger from young people?
The young people were angry. These are well-educated people. They have nothing to do. These are the messes that the current government inherited. And through the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which the president always talks about, and he prioritized 5 areas, is to create jobs for these people, to create things to do.
You keep saying inherited. Isn't President Ruto, wasn't he a long-standing senior member of the previous government?
Well,
how do you inherit something you were in?
Mehdi.
Listen, Mehdi.
What am I missing?
Mehdi, let me just explain, because post-2017, William Ruto was deputy president just by name.
Okay.
That's a fact of life. Fine. And therefore, when the panelist speaks about inheritance, he knows.
I do want to talk more about President Ruto. We're going to do that in the second half of this show. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back in part 2, we'll carry on talking to Kimani Ichung'wah and to our panel. We're going to hear from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall. See you after the break. Welcome back to Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest today is Kimani Ichung'wah. He is the majority leader in Kenya's National Assembly and a close ally of President William Ruto. Kimani, we've been talking about the protests and the violence and police accountability in part 1. Let's talk about Kenyan politics in more detail. Last year, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project named ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad as the most corrupt leader in the world. There were 5 other finalists, though. Out of those 5, can you tell me who received the most votes?
You tell me.
William Ruto received the most votes.
Who was voting?
A lot of Kenyans voted, actually. They submitted his name to the OCCRP. I mean, you have a real corruption problem in Kenya, and you ran on a platform. I just want to quote you to our viewers, and you can respond. You said, we shall not just speak about corruption, but we shall act. President Ruto said something similar during the election campaign in 2022. And yet last year, a US government report said that Kenya has failed to implement its anti-corruption laws, and the country has dropped 3 spots in Transparency International's annual corruption index. That is pretty embarrassing for your party, your government, is it not?
Kimani Ichung'wah, the majority leader of the Kenyan National Assembly, staunchly defends the Ruto government amidst allegations of police misconduct during recent protests. I do not believe there are enforced disappearances perpetuated by the state in Kenya, Ichung'wah asserted passionately to head-to-head host Mehdi Hassan as the audience listened intently. Responding to concerns about violent crackdowns by police against demonstrators, Ichung'wah emphasized the need for dialogue rather than conspiracy theories. He highlighted that the protests, particularly those against the finance bill in June 2024, reflect a broader frustration among young Kenyans seeking change. Ichung'wah pointed out that since President Ruto took office in 2022, there have been alarming reports of civilian deaths and unlawful detentions. Despite the harsh realities presented by the Kenya Human Rights Commission, Ichung'wah remains unwavering in his commitment to support the government he believes is working for the people.
It's embarrassing for any country to be ranked anyhow in terms of corruption perception. Mehdi, it's true. I said we will not talk about corruption, we will act. If you live in the Kenyan soil today, you will know close to 18,000 public services now are digitized, principally to try and preempt corrupt practices, because it is in provision of services where people get engaged into corruption and corrupt activities. Two, I will tell you, not a single mega scandal. Look at all previous administrations in Kenya, right from the Kenyatta one, the Moi regime, 24 years, to the Kibaki regime, to the Uhuru Kenyatta regime.
But you have dropped.
There were mega scandals.
So why have you dropped 3 places in the annual corruption rate?
Not a single mega scandal.
You made that point. I'm not disputing that.
Last week.
I'm asking why you've dropped 3 places in the annual ranking.
Because the indexes are based on perception. Today, Mehdi, when you ran out an advert that I was going to appear on this show, you have seen what has happened on Twitter, in Kenya and globally. Yeah.
Obviously, every politician has their critic.
Even on the Al Jazeera page. Because Kenyans are like that. Kenyans are very participatory and active. And therefore,
so your country just looks corrupt because Kenyans are very vocal. Is that what you're saying?
Ask Kenyans, if you announce today that you're doing a corruption perception here today, and ask them, is Kimani Ichung'wah corrupt? They will all storm your pages and perceive me to be corrupt.
We'll come back to you in a moment.
Ask them to give you evidence of a single corruption case.
So hold on.
Against Kimani Ichung'wah, they will not. The same for William Ruto. They will not give you a single
I'll come back to Ruto in a second.
scandal of corruption under this administration.